see, we always say about now we're talking about 200,000 deaths. That's the tip of the iceberg. There's at least probably 5 times more individuals who have significant deficits as a consequence of their infection, and we give it the name long haul. This is a brand new virus, so we don't know how long this is really going to last. But what we're seeing is, remember, this virus is not just causing lung injury; it causes terrible vascular injury, clotting issues, thrombotic events. That means heart attacks, pulmonary emboli, strokes, and people are suffering for a long time because of those very important events. And then we're also seeing, from the mechanism we don't really understand, chronic neurologic deficits, cognitive disturbances. Some people are calling it brain fog. They just can't concentrate. They're exhausted. They have chronic fatigue. And we're also seeing a lot of neuropsychiatric disturbance. Depression is really common now. And so we'll know over the next year the full extent of this illness, but it's a terrible illness to get. It's not just a matter of a light switch. Either you die or you survive significant disability because of this. And again, this virus affects so many people living in low-income neighborhoods, many who don't have insurance. This virus has revealed a lot of problems in our healthcare infrastructure and our level of insurance and our health system. So all this is going to come out over the next year, and this is going to have long-term ramifications. It's going to affect medical training for residents. This will be with us for years.
Yeah, so we're in a whole new phase of this when we talk about long haul. Dr. Peter Hotez, so grateful to have you with us and your expertise. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
The new chant at the Trump rallies, "Bill that sees the president," hyping up the supporters, promising to announce a nominee soon. We'll talk with two political strategists about the debate and what should happen next. Should he pick, and should this Senate confirm? 페어링을 해서 배달을 하고자 여기 이제 공주중앙에 입점하게 되었습니다.
Next, I followed the delicious aroma and noticed the chef making zucchini dishes.
저희가 이 육수는 매일매일 아침에 끓이고요. 사골 육수 베이스로 해서 한 3, 4일 정도 저희가 이제 숙성을 해요. 조미료는 안 들어가고. 아무래도 배달 음식이다 보니까 너무 이제 많이 익어서 가면 가는 동안에 조금 더 익게 돼서 적당히 이제 익힌 상태에서 저희가 지금 조리를 하고 보내고 있어요.
The kitchen is bombarded with orders for late night snacks. What kind of a dish is made in this kitchen?
족발과 보쌈을 전문적으로 하는 곳인데 그중에서도 저희는 족발이 메인입니다. 네. 다른 데하고 좀 다른 점은 저희 같은 경우는 족발을 삶은 다음에 화덕으로 한 번 더 조리를 해요. 그래서 보통 족발이 따뜻하면 좀 부드러워지잖아요. 그리고 차가우면 쫄깃쫄깃하고 저희는 따뜻하지만 쫄깃쫄깃합니다. 네. 화덕을 한 번 사용하면 기름기가 많이 빠지고 굉장히 쫄깃쫄깃해져요. 그게 저희 가진 특징입니다.
Many different restaurants are in this shared kitchen. They concentrate on their dishes and do a lot of research. That's why they help in development of the delivery culture. We hope to see a powerful ripple effect through the shared kitchen. The next place we went to is a popular delivery service that is trying out something new. They deliver food from famous restaurants, but they also deliver items purchased at the Yeongdong Traditional Market. The delivery people drop by all the stalls at the market. The shop owner begins packaging the ordered items after receiving a call from the delivery service. The delivery man arrives and picks up the package.
배달 시켜보시고 반응이 너무 좋고 맛있다고 해서 많이 부응되고 있습니다.
The shop owners at the marketplace are satisfied with the service. The next place the delivery man dropped by was the mill where they make chili powder, a place that's only found in traditional markets.
고맙습니다. 안녕히 계세요.
It looks like the shop owners are used to seeing the delivery people.
편하지. 내가 배달하고 픽을 시키면 편하지.
영동시장에 오시면 없는 거 빼고 다 있습니다. 많이 찾아주세요.
Delivery service has become a part of the daily life at the traditional market, so we spoke with the delivery rider.
그리고 이제 시장도 다니면서 상인들이랑도 친해지고 할 것 같은데 상인들이랑 이제 고객님들이랑 반응이 어떤지 이런 서비스에 대해서.
상인분들은 어쨌든 매출이 많이 올라가서 좋고요. 고객분들은 간단하게 앱이라든가 전화만으로 저희한테 필요하신 것들을 말로나 아니면 앱으로 바로 터치 몇 번만으로 살 수 있으니까 네, 엄청 좋아하고 계세요.
다른 데보다요 반찬 종류도 많거니와 좀 금요일이면은 평소 때보다 좀 싸게 드려요.
It seems that everyone is satisfied with the service.
네, 고맙습니다. 안녕히 계세요.
The next place we went to was an apartment in Gangnam. I could see the delivery person pedaling intently on his
especially in wide areas. And when the game opens up, David Duggar a little upset that Kimmich isn't walking away with a yellow card here, but good run from Amin Harit.
Mark Wood in position to take this. Sent on loan to his home city of Cologne to play for Köln. Second half of last season, much better there in the Dortmund. He was with Schalke. That is the big question mark. The Königsblauen, how will some of these players who return to the club get on? Wood, that flighted ball, and it comes off in the end. Niklas Süle. Back to Manuel Neuer. Well, that carried a bit of a threat to him.
Just a fantastic ball in for Moods. Outswinging ball in front of Manuel Neuer. Niklas Süle struggling with that ball. Lucky for him that Neuer was on his toes, but great.
Will be a woman.
The president telling reporters there are about 45 people on his list for potential nominees. The White House wants to announce the pick before the first debate with Democratic nominee Joe Biden on September 29th. A source tells CNN that Trump would love to pick federal appeals judge Amy Coney Barrett, but doesn't think he will get the support from the Senate that he needs. The vacancy on the bench creates what many conservatives view as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to shift the court from its current split of 5 conservative justices and 4 liberal justices to a more dominant 6-3 majority. Both Republicans and Democrats are pouring money into the fight to fill the now vacant Supreme Court seat, as we've been talking about. Joining me, reporter Rebecca Buck from Washington. And this move, Rebecca, is a fast one. As we heard several times, Trump is saying, yes, I want to nominate a woman to fill the justice's seat.
That's right, and a controversial decision, obviously, Susan, with Democrats and some Republicans even coming out and saying that the president and the Republican Senate should wait until after the election and even until there's a clear winner and the next president would be the one to fill that vacancy and nominate a replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But the president not pumping the brakes. Instead, he is putting his foot on the gas and intends to nominate someone this week for that vacancy. And the Republican Senate hoping to move as quickly as possible as well. Obviously, politics is at play here. It's a presidential election year. The first debate is coming up between Joe Biden and President Donald Trump in just about 10 days here, in a week or two, on September 29th. And so this is going to be one of the big topics of conversation, and the president believes this is something that can motivate his base. Just yesterday in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he held a rally, his supporters were chanting, fill that seat, referring obviously to the vacancy caused by Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. So the president viewing this as to his political advantage to move quickly, and obviously many Senate Republicans very eager to fill that seat with someone who is a conservative. Susan.
Any word from Biden on this? Obviously, he wants them to wait until after the election to fill that seat. Any word on potential nominees from former VP Biden?
He hasn't mentioned any names in particular. Obviously, a stark contrast to the president, who released a full list, a long list of people he would consider for a vacancy, and now he's saying that he would pick a woman. There are a few front runners that he mentioned in a call Friday with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. But Joe Biden keeping his powder dry here, trying to focus on the big picture, the macro issue of this vacancy. His supporters and his allies, for example, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, saying that people know the type of person that he would choose. Obviously, it wouldn't be someone conservative like we would see from President Trump and confirmed by Senate Republicans. It would be someone more middle of the road, more mainstream, is what Senator Coons had to say. Democrats also concerned that if Joe Biden were to go into specific names at this point, it would distract from the larger issue and also from other things he wants to focus on in this campaign, namely the mismanagement of the COVID pandemic by President Trump. That's going to be still one of issues in this election and a focus for Joe Biden as well. Susan.
Rebecca Buck in Washington, thank you.
Thank you.
Justice Ginsburg has influenced so many, as you know. Out of Colorado, a female-run business is honoring Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg with a new brew of all things called I Dissent. Lady Justice Brewing, it's called, out of Colorado, donates profits to promote the status of Colorado women and girls through grants. Soon after opening in April, the brewery owner and her colleagues commissioned a mural by a female artist of Justice Ginsburg.
When I look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what I think is, do better. That stare is like, don't you dare quit. Don't you dare. We're going to work as hard as we can to keep moving her work forward. That's not going to stop.
The owner and attorney herself said it's because of Ruth Bader Ginsburg that she never worried about being rejected over her gender. An update now on the TikTok back and forth. The president says he has approved a deal in concept between the company and two U.S. companies.
We have a deal worked out, I think, with Walmart is going to buy it, along with Oracle, Larry Ellison. It's going to be an incredible combination.
While speaking at a rally that was last night in North Carolina, the president also added the deal will include a $5 billion fund for U.S. education. Although this morning the Chinese owner of TikTok tweeted that part of the deal was news to them, first time hearing it. The purchase does still need to be approved by both China and the U.S., but for now, it means the restrictions set to take effect today have been averted, again, for now. There are no suspects still after a shooting at a house party in Rochester that injured 14 people. 2 people were killed. Dan Schrack from our affiliate WHAM reports police believe a small invite-only party went awry when people from 2 nearby parties began to converge into one.
In this case, as well as in all cases, is that we need the community to come forward and help us with this investigation.
Rochester police now searching for suspects in a mass shooting overnight.
If anybody has any pictures or videos, they can email them to us.
Police called to Pennsylvania Avenue shortly before midnight for a report of shots fired. The overnight incident, the result of a fight after 3 neighborhood parties merged.
I need cars. I need citywide, all the police cars available on the scene.
More than 100 people ran for their lives as police say 3 to 4 gunmen fired off at least 40 rounds, killing 2 teenagers and injuring 14 other people.
It's just a tragic situation here.
The mass tragedy coming at a time when police, the mayor, and other city officials face increased scrutiny of their handling of the death of a black man in police custody earlier this year.
We have to work together collectively to ensure that our community is safe, and we will continue to do that.
The tragedy sending a shockwave through the neighborhood. Neighbors leaning on one another tonight, hoping the violence will end.
I might not be hurt today, but tomorrow it might be me and my family. And so we come together as the Lord leads us.
More than 40 rounds fired. Police say the 2 victims were both just 19 years old and more likely than not the intended targets of that. Here's a question for you. Are you feeling isolated, maybe lonely during this pandemic? If so, you were not alone. But are you telling anyone? Podcast host Pete Dominic says he now hears from men in particular after sharing his story. The technology he now uses and even used to. Hundreds of people evacuated ahead of Hurricane Sally. They are now coming home to widespread destruction. Look at that flooding. I'm going to speak to the mayor of Pensacola next.
I'm mostly focused on saying, what is it that we have to do to keep innovating
and then making sure that our participation in the countries that we operate in is adding value. Ultimately, the governments across these countries will have to achieve a new equilibrium for how trade and fair trade happens. But that's not something I control. The thing that I can control is our innovation and the opportunity we create around innovation.
Welcome back. We are tracking coronavirus across the country. In Wisconsin, health officials say more than 2,000 people have tested positive for COVID-19 for the third day in a row. New cases were reported in all but 2 of the state's 72 counties. Wisconsin could cross 100,000 cases by today. To Utah now, the governor renewed the state of emergency there after a recent surge in cases. The state recorded 1,000 plus cases on Saturday and on Friday too. This order will remain in effect until October 20th or until the governor says the threat has passed. To Illinois now, more than 5 million coronavirus tests have been done during this pandemic. That's according to the state's health department. Of that 5 million, more than 272,000 were positive results. Speaking of the global pandemic, so many have felt isolated, alone, looking for purpose maybe. Pete Dominic is a veteran stand-up comedian, host of Stand Up with Pete Dominic podcast. He joins me now. And Pete, it's good to see you. It's not just during the pandemic that people can feel alone and isolated. You shared your story with me soon after you were let go from your job. You were fired, and then men started to reach out to you.
Yeah. It's when I first lost my job, I came out as vulnerably and as honestly as I could to talk about what I was going through in hopes that I would hear from other men, whether I knew them or not, that had been through something similar. And it was an amazing reaction, Susan. When I put myself out there, the universe, the world, and most people are good, I firmly believe, gave me a big hug. And I have hundreds of new friends as a result. And thanks to you, too, for having me on the show several times during that really rough time in my life.
And you certainly don't have a problem, Pete, communicating. You're also a comedian, but people may confuse that with someone who's always happy, has tons of friends. Oh, why are you upset? Snap out of it. And you found that men, especially on this new technology that you're using, feel that they can really say, hey, you know what? I'm lonely. And it doesn't mean necessarily that they feel sad all the time. It's just that they may be in a depression.
Yeah, I think that we're generalizing about how men communicate, of course, but generally men communicate really well about a wide range of subjects. Of course, sports, maybe work-related issues, and any number of other issues. But when it comes to talking about the things that are most personal to you, we worry. We worry about putting ourselves out there. We want to be tough and we want to be strong, which is why it's great that you have segments like this to talk about men's mental health. So I was introduced to a video chatting application, and I don't want to sound like I'm doing like yourself, down in Sydney, Australia, named David Campbell said, listen, you're going through a tough time, download this app and we'll chat. And basically, Susan, what happens is he'll make a video and he sends it to me, and then I respond with a video of my own. This might not sound like a big deal to people, but I think when men are talking about the toughest things, I lost my job, I'm really worried about what's happening in the world, or I'm having a really hard time with my wife or my kids, when you just talk to that camera, it's like you're not worried about being judged. You don't have to worry about what you're going to say. You don't have to quickly react to what he is going to say. So we use this, in our case, we use this Marco Polo app. And David Campbell basically opened the world to me. He allowed me to say whatever was on my mind at that time and respond. And now I've introduced it to so many men, including a lot of people who listen to my podcast. And it's been a real game changer as a way for men to communicate. Friends of mine from high school that I haven't talked to for years are now sharing their problems with me and mine with them. And it's amazing. And we have a lot of laughs, too.
And finally, how are you doing in the time that you've been doing your podcast? Because this was pre-COVID that you started it. How has it been for you? And I'm sure this has helped you being able to communicate, connect with others.
Things have really turned around for me. I've been able to, the podcast is really taken off. I do it every single day. I talk to experts on my podcast, basically what I do. And it's been a game changer because I get to talk to people. That's the thing. I say every day at the end of my show, you are not alone. Especially men who don't necessarily have a lot of people to talk to. I mean, loneliness in middle-aged men can be fatal. There's statistics to this. So I talk to people for my podcast every day, but I also talk to the listeners in a number of different ways, whether it be on Zoom chats or these apps. So I keep communicating with people, and I keep talking to people and being honest with people, and it makes you feel like you're not alone. And that's what we all need right now, to make sure that we don't feel like we're not alone, because now more than ever we can feel isolated, and being isolated can be dangerous.
Yeah, well said. I know you performed last night, right, at a drive-thru, and you woke up early for us.
Yeah, we did a stand-up comedy show. It was with David Tell, the great David Tell, at a parking lot at a mall. What? Susan and I had to perform in a parking lot of a Dick's. Dick's Sporting Goods. Another club.
Okay. All right, well, it's fair. Morning weekend show. Be Dominic. Always good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
A new warning now. Pregnant women who are infected with COVID-19 and are hospitalized because of it could be more likely to give birth prematurely. This is from the CDC. More than half of the women in a study were asymptomatic. The data showed, we should point out, it did not say why some of the women were in the hospital, if it was for pregnancy reasons versus reasons related to COVID, but researchers do say pregnant women should be aware of the risk. So why could it take months for a bridge in Pensacola to reopen after Hurricane Sally. And why this now? Check it out. An MMA star's win prompted President Trump to get on the phone and say, hey, congrats.
In the past, business leaders have felt that their job is, to worry about the next quarter's earnings, to worry about the shareholders, and then to leave governments and social sectors to worry about. If we can actually now bring more and more and more entrepreneurs and business leaders into the fold and actually tackling issues, I think we can get on top of the problems a lot much quicker.
Ladies and gentlemen, the silent majority is ready to make some noise. If you thought that was a beating, wait till November 3rd when Donald Trump gets his hands on Sleepy Joe. That's going to be a landslide.
That was UFC star Colby Covington giving a shout out to President Trump after last night's win, and the president was quick to congratulate him. Andy Schultz is with me with the details. Hi, Andy.
Yeah, good morning, Susan. As you can tell, Colby Covington, a big fan of President Trump. The two actually hung out
backstage at Trump's rally last Sunday in Nevada. They took some pictures together. President Trump even doing a video telling everyone to watch Covington's fight last night. Covington, after the fight, rocking a signed MAGA hat after the win. And President Trump, he called him. He said he left his rally to watch the fight, and then he congratulated Covington.
You are a great fighter, man. I'll tell you. You make it so easy out of that. Congratulations. I wanted to watch that fight tonight. I wanted to watch it. You were great.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. You gave me the dragon energy when you shook my hand on Sunday at your rally, and it doesn't matter if King Kong was in front of me. I was not going to lose after getting to shake your hand and give you all
Blowing big leads to the Heat games 1 and 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals led to some frustrations boiling over in the Celtics locker room, but they weren't going to let that happen in Game 3. At second quarter, Jaylen Brown gets the block on one end, and Jason Tatum clears out Jay Crowder, throws it down. Lost the lead by as many as 19 in the third, and they cruise to a 117-106 win. 4 Celtics had at least 20 points. Game 4 of that series going to be tomorrow night. The Lakers looking for a 2-0 lead in the West Finals. They play the Nuggets tonight. You can catch that game 9 Eastern on our sister network, TNT. All right, finally, Matthew Wolff putting on a show at the U.S. Open yesterday. The 21-year-old who made his major championship debut just last month at the PGA Championship, shooting a 565 to take a 2-shot lead over Bryson DeChambeau. Wolff will be the first man in 107 years to win the U.S. Open in his debut if he's able to get it done today. And so Wolff saying his agent was actually recently diagnosed with cancer, so he would love to go out there and win this tournament for him.
Yeah, I'm pulling for him because of it, Andy. Thank you. To California, the fires there continue to burn. Will cooler temps bring the much needed relief to the thousands of firefighters? They are doing what they can to gain control. A poison-laced package was sent to President Trump. It was intercepted by law enforcement. What they found. Monday morning, September 20th. I'm Susan Hendricks. Time to get you in the know with your headlines. Another side effect we have seen of COVID-19, missed meals. More than 1 billion. That's according to a new study published in the American Journal of Health. It happened between the months of March and May when schools were shut down. The report suggests innovative ways to keep feeding kids during this pandemic. Some who are still out of school learning virtually, like offering grab-and-go options or a week's worth of meals at once. The FBI is now investigating along with the Secret Service after a package containing the poison ricin was addressed to President Trump. It was intercepted before it made it to the White House. The package is believed to be connected to others that were sent to Texas from an address in Canada. A former Arlington, Virginia police officer has been indicted for the fatal shooting of Margarita Brooks. It happened a year ago. The officer was apparently responding to a call for an unconscious woman. When an unleashed dog approached, the officer shot the dog 3 times, striking that woman and killing her. The former officer faces up to 2 years in prison. In California, the raging wildfires continue to burn. The Bobcat fire in Jupiter Hills has burned more than 93,000 acres. Across the state, more than 27 fires are burning. 19,000 fire crew members are on the ground trying to gain control, hoping for cooler weather. They just may get it. Meanwhile, officials have confirmed 1 firefighter has sadly died battling the El Dorado fire that was sparked by a gender reveal party about 70 miles east of Los Angeles. That fire has scorched more than 21,000 acres.
The house was shaking. It was shaking. It really was. I wasn't so concerned about the water being, but I was concerned about the roof coming off the house.
Flooding is bad. We had 30 inches of rain in Pensacola, which is 4 months of rain in 4 hours.
My friend Keith got a big beach house on the water, had an electrical fire, started from a generator. His house is completely gone.
Widespread river flooding is ongoing, and it could continue over the next weeks in different parts of Florida.
Wow, when you see that aerial shot, it is bad there in Florida. Senator Marco Rubio says Pensacola's famous 3-mile bridge will take almost 3 months to repair. The destruction is bad to that bridge. You see it here, look close. This is from Hurricane Sally. The senator tweeted the bridge was struck by large during the hurricane. Senator Rubio says he and Governor Ron DeSantis have asked President Trump for a major disaster declaration for that region, and you see why. Meanwhile, cleanup efforts are underway throughout Florida. Thousands still without power. Hundreds of people had to be evacuated from their homes, now returning to really nothing. And look at the flooding here. Hannah Reyes, she's from Pensacola. She says they will rebuild and they're resilient.
Our community is really resilient. They're going to do what it takes. This is a town that knows what hurricanes do. They know the gas will be gone, they know the food will be gone, and they know how to overcome it. So I think it's just a matter of finding an alternate route and taking it and just breathing through that morning traffic and realizing that's just for a short amount of time. But yeah, I think the trick is really just staying positive, not pointing the finger at anyone, because who can really control the power of a hurricane? No one. So.
Yeah, no one can control it. I'm joined now by Pensacola Mayor Grover Robinson. Mayor, you heard the resident there saying you are resilient. Hurricane Sally did some real damage, though, and it was worse than you thought it would be, right?
Well, it certainly did some damage. We did not expect as much wind. However, this is much more of what you heard from people, the water event, from storm surge and the 30 inches of rain. Most of that is now figured out, but I was with Senator Rubio yesterday, and then with Senator Scott and Governor DeSantis were here. What we've seen is we're in the process of recovery right now is getting power back on. Mine came on just before sunset last night. So I'm very happy. I think most of the power now is getting out in the city of Pensacola. Gulf Power expects to have power to 95% of Scandee County residents by the end of Tuesday. So power is the most important part right now. And from that standpoint, what we're also...
Turn for the worse in the case count, though, tells us something very different.
Donald Trump. We need very sharp people. Joe is not qualified for this position. Joe Biden.
Donald Trump doesn't understand duty, honor, country.
The most
most anticipated moment of the election.
Biden wants to surrender our country to the virus.
He knew how deadly it was.
He's following the radical left agenda.
Do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? Really?
The first presidential debate. Watch it live on CNN. Special coverage Wednesday, September 30th. From street food to historic revivals, Egypt's food culture is simmering. With its mix of traditions and world influences, expanding far beyond Cairo.
We were reviving old recipes that kind of disappearing right now.
Venture on a journey to meet those who are carving out new niches on the culinary map and discover the country's best flavors in the most unusual places. Feast on Egypt, Saturday on CNN.
A mask can say a lot about the person who wears it. But even more about the person who doesn't.
To open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of the camera.
Trust that you'll listen.
So great that you're here today. Just highlights what's making a difference.
You'll be honest. I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them? Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair. It was an unprecedented move, very eerie. All the roads have been closed off. Describe the scene that you arrived to. The Apache attack helicopter. This is what Captain Wales has been flying. What do you do with Crimea?
This is Europe's problem.
Do you want talks with them?
What is the point of talking now?
We continue to monitor the government in crisis. This was the Duchess's first news interview. Rare access indeed. That's what it's all about. Max Oscar, CNN.
I think it's fair to say that we are in the middle of a transition. There is huge appetite out there for clean mobility, for either full electric or plug-in hybrid transport solution. Now, every customer wanting to buy into it at this point in time? Not yet. We're not going to make people choose a car based on the source of energy. We're going to offer a choice.
President Trump again last night at his rally in North Carolina says we are turning a final corner in the coronavirus fight. The numbers, though, tell us it is nowhere near that simple. Let's just go through and take a look. Number one, today or tomorrow, we will hit a very sad milestone in the United States of America. 200,000 Americans killed by the coronavirus. 200,000. We will hit that number today or tomorrow, and all the projections tell us we will go higher and higher and higher through the end of this year. You see how sad. In April, 50,000 deaths. By July 28th, 150. We're 199,000 plus today. A sad milestone just ahead. That is because of the case curve here, and there are some troubling signs in the data in recent days. Go back before the summer, we had the new infections down to about 20,000 a day. Then this horrible post-Memorial Day, post-July 4th, the surge up to nearly 70,000 cases a day in the middle of July. A slow drop down, and we thought we were going to stay below 40,000, perhaps pushing the baseline down below 40,000 new infections a day. But look, back up in recent days here, a troubling sign. Post-Labor Day, into the cooler weather, a troubling sign of the case count starting to head up there. And this tells you all you need to know. 31 states reporting more new infections this week compared to a week ago. 31 states heading in the wrong direction. When the president says we have turned the final corner, 15 states holding steady, 4 states trending down. And you look at this in the map here, 25 states are reporting more positive tests this week than last week. 25 states reporting higher positivity in the coronavirus testing this week than last week. Let's stop there and bring into the conversation Dr. Rajesh Shah. He is the Dean of the Brown School of Public Health. And Dr. Shah, I ask this question every Sunday, where are we? When the president says we have turned a final corner, when you look at several days again back at or above 40,000, and when you look at 25 states saying the positivity rate higher this week than last week, which tells you inevitably there are more cases coming in those states, because when so many people are positive, more people get infected. Where are we?
Yeah, so good morning, John, and thank you for having me on. You know, a couple of weeks ago, as we went into Labor Day, we were talking about exactly this, our worry that coming out of Labor Day, as we've seen out of Memorial Day and July 4th, we'd see an increase. And I was hoping that the third time was going to be the charm. We were going to learn and not do this. And yet, it does look like cases are starting to rise again. And unfortunately, we're walking into the fall where weather gets colder. We're going to spend more time indoors. So this is not where we want to be as a country right now.
Not where we want to be. And I just want to put up the testing trend in the sense that you and I have talked for months now about your concern the United States is not testing enough, number one, and then there's the confusion over the guidelines, number two. Testing has been pretty level at about 800,000 tests for a long time. Above that, a couple of days above that in recent days. I know you think it should go even higher than that, but is testing adequate, number one? And then this last week, we had the politics of all this play out right before our very eyes. A few weeks back, we talked about the mystery. Why was the CDC suddenly suggesting asymptomatic people who believe they had been in contact with somebody with COVID should not be tested? Then we learned it was political influence from the president's deputies at the Department of Health and Human Services. And then they flipped it again and essentially went back to the original guidance. There's still confusion when it comes to testing.
Oh, there's a lot of confusion. And it's unfortunate because if you listen to the scientists, including the scientists of the CDC, we've all been pretty clear that people who've been exposed, even if they're asymptomatic, need to be tested. But to your question of do we have adequate testing? The question is adequate for what? Do we have enough testing so we can get kids back to school safely? Nope. Do we have enough testing so we can get college students back to campus safely? We don't. Do we have enough testing for first responders, for nursing homes, for prisons, for workers in factories? The answer to each of those questions is we don't. And yet we keep hearing from the administration we have plenty of testing. As long as you don't want to test and protect those groups, I suppose you could argue we do, but we clearly don't. Everybody knows it. And we've got to keep pushing on trying to drive testing up.
And as you know, the president, he can't change these numbers. He has tried with tweets and with false statements and the like, but we're about to hit 200,000 Americans dead. And when you look at the case trends coming up, 31 states now reporting more new infections this week than last week. The president in the briefing room the other day suddenly said that, yes, there will be a vaccine soon. Yes, it will be mass distributed by April. Listen.
As soon as a vaccine is approved, the administration will deliver it to the American people immediately. Distribution will begin within 24 hours after notice. Hundreds of millions of doses will be available every month, and we expect to have enough vaccines for every American by April.
The president told us months ago the vaccine, the virus would be gone by last April. Is it realistic to believe people will be able to get on a big level vaccines by next April?
So I do think that we're going to see large numbers of Americans getting vaccinated by kind of late spring, summer. So April, May, June is not, I think it's not out of the possibility. But the first thing we got to do is make sure that the vaccine is safe and effective. We haven't seen those data, and I remain concerned about political interference in that process. But assuming that the scientists get to drive that process and we have a vaccine, I think very few people will get vaccinated in 2020. It'll start ramping up early 21. And sometime in late spring, summer, a majority of Americans will have access to a vaccine.
I hope that works out that way. Dr. Ashish Shah, the Dean of the Brown School of Public Health, sir, thanks again for your important insights this Sunday.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Next for us, the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, legal trailblazer and celebrity role model.
I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks.
Can someone working alone solve all the world's biggest challenges? As we overcome pandemic, isn't collaboration the way we'll bring clean water to the world's mega cities and produce enough food for a growing population? At SABIC, we believe that the chemistry between people is the chemistry that matters. SABIC.
Africa Avant-Garde, Saturday on CNN.
This is stupid. We gotta work together.
You're right.
This is CNN 10. My name is Carlos Zeus. I'll be your explainer-in-chief.
Relevant stories, complex issues explained all in 10 minutes. CNN 10, a virtual learning resource you can use at home. Stream at cnn.com/CNN10. This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
A comparison to the great Thurgood Marshall is one thing you find in the obituaries detailing the remarkable life of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Marshall, of course, helped lay the legal groundwork for civil rights before becoming a judge and a justice. Justice Ginsburg was a legal trailblazer for women's rights before she was a judge and justice. Her most noteworthy majority opinion was a 1996 case in which the court told the Virginia Military Institute its all-male admissions policy was unconstitutional. Justice Ginsburg would gain more notoriety, though, for her pointed dissents taking issue with the court's conservative majority.
In our view, the court does not comprehend or is indifferent to the insidious way in which women can be victims of pay discrimination.
Notorious RBG was the nickname she loved, and the many t-shirts, tattoos, and murals around America are proof of her unlikely celebrity.
People ask me, don't you feel uncomfortable being with a name like the notorious B.I.G.? And why should I feel uncomfortable? We have a lot in common.
Here is one of the countless tributes on Twitter. I became a lawyer because my family had been plaintiffs in a groundbreaking school desegregation case, but I became a woman's rights lawyer because of Justice Ginsburg. Fatima Gus Graves wrote this morning. She is the president of the National Women's Law Center. Grateful for your time on this Sunday. Put into context, Justice Ginsburg changed America, and she changed you.
That's right. I mean, this is a truly sad day in our movement. Justice Ginsburg was a giant in American history. She was a giant in the law, and really a trailblazer for so many women like me, and the architect of so many of our foundational rights. So we are feeling it deeply, and it's actually why I think women in this country will fight to preserve her awesome legacy.
Well, you mentioned women fight to preserve that legacy. I just want to show you a picture of the current court. Obviously, Justice Ginsburg has passed. If you look at the court right now, you see the Chief Justice in the center here, and Justice Ginsburg appropriately seated to his left. This is a 5-4, very narrowly, carefully balanced court. If Mr. Trump, President Trump, gets to replace Justice Ginsburg, you will have a 6-3 conservative majority. And even John Roberts, who has gone back and forth between the conservatives and the liberals, would lose some of his sway as well. What do you see at stake if President Trump gets to fill this vacancy?
Well, the first thing I should say is I think it's unthinkable that the idea that President Trump would fill this vacancy during an election where people have already voted. It would sully the legitimacy of this court and our democracy and her legacy. But there is so much at stake, whether it is access to health care or the unrelenting attacks that we're facing across this country from anti-abortion extremists, or whether this administration can radically restructure federal benefits, or harassment, assault in schools, or taxpayer dollars, whether organizations can take them and then, on the other hand, turn away people, our democracy really is on the line. Justice Ginsburg's legacy was deep around gender justice, but it was deep on so many things. Her escaping dissent in Shelby County decision was part of the reason that she was known as notorious RBG. And the Ledbetter decision, where she really demonstrated her ability to put the reality of the lives for everyday people, the reality of women's lives front and center. That is a huge loss in this moment.
And so if you look back the last 30 years, we have seen the shift of the court. You can go back to when Clarence Thomas replaced Thurgood Marshall on the court. And if you look at this graphic I have up here, the shifts that you see in yellow, that's essentially a liberal replacing a liberal, a moderate replacing a moderate. But the ones in white, Thomas for Marshall, Alito replacing the more moderate Sandra Day O'Connor, and most recently, of course, Justice Kavanaugh replacing the moderate Anthony Kennedy. This court would shift quite dramatically. The conventional wisdom, Fatima, is that this energizes Republicans, this energizes evangelicals, this helps Republicans. In these early hours since we lost Justice Ginsburg, do you see evidence to the contrary?
We are hearing constantly from women in this country who are asking us, what can they do? Many of them are still shaken from the nomination of Justice Kavanaugh and the way that process went down. And I actually think what is at stake is our ability to actually have our foundational protections clear. But it really is the legitimacy of the court. I think people will rise. People were out at the courts across the country last night. They are wondering what they can do, and they will show up. And the reason is to go back to my first point, is that it is truly unthinkable, the conversation that is happening right now. We should just be in this period marking and celebrating her legacy. And the fact that looming over us right now is the idea that we could make an illegitimate appointment to a place seat on the highest court in this country after people have already started voting. The hypocrisy is just outrageous, and it is disturbing.
Eva Cosgraves is president of the National Women's Law Center. We will keep in touch as we watch this remarkable fight unfold and as we mourn the passing of this legendary justice. Fatima, thank you so much for your time on this Sunday, and that's it for us on Inside Politics. Hope you can catch us weekdays as well. We're here at 11 a.m. Eastern and noon as well. Up next, State of the Union with Jake Tapper. Very busy State of the Union. His guests include the president who nominated Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Bill Clinton, Senator Amy Klobuchar, the Vice President's Chief of Staff, Mark Short, and the administration's coronavirus testing czar, Admiral Brett Giroir. Thanks again for sharing your Sunday. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Let's take a look at your August climate update. 2020 actually had the 4th warmest August on record, and when you look overall, you'll notice some regions had bigger anomalies than others. Overall, August 2020 had a 1 degree Celsius rise above those pre-industrial levels, but you'll see some target points there of Central Europe, Northern Russia, and even the Western United States that had significant anomalies in terms of those above average temperatures. But the Western U.S., it wasn't just above average, but also very dry conditions, and the combination of those two led to some unprecedented wildfires across several states. Quite the opposite, however, in the Korean Peninsula, that saw an incredibly wet August with their precipitation numbers well above average. Now, August is normally a very wet month, but even in this particular instance, it was well above average.
These frescoes are about 150 years old. We are now at the Sheesh Mahal, or the Hall of Mirrors. Most palaces in Rajasthan, or especially in Jaipur region, had a room like this, which they use for very private entertaining. I'm Yarna Singh, the co-owner of the Samod Palace. The Samod Palace is located in the village of Samod, which is a fortified village surrounded by hills. As a child, I remember spending a lot of time here. The Samod Palace was converted into a hotel in 1987. I think the biggest challenge was to add modern amenities without spoiling the charm of the old world. This is our heritage, and we have to leave it for the kids who make it even better.
Donald Trump. We need very sharp people. Joe is not qualified for this position.
Joe Biden.
Donald Trump doesn't understand duty, honor, country.
The first
first presidential debate. Watch it live on CNN. Special coverage Wednesday, September 30th.
I'm Phil Black in Stockholm, and this is CNN.
It really only takes a few moments to gain an appreciation of just how tough it is out here. They've been coming across sniper fire, gunfire, mortar rounds. You can see really just how intense it is here. Just to wrap it up right now, quite anxious about spending too much time on scene. Those are the kids really struggling to get away. They feel like they won't be able to outrun the war. They thought the whole border was over. People are just kind of flustered with what they think is going to be a better life. These nurses, these doctors really have nerves of steel. You can't help but be struck by how interconnected our world is. Arwa Damon, CNN.
I'm Ivan Watson in Hong Kong, and this is CNN.
Supreme legacy. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died at age 87. A pioneer on the Supreme Court, a trailblazer for women, and a champion for those fighting for equality.
I love the work I do. I think I have the best job in the world.
We'll remember Justice Ginsburg's legacy with the man who nominated her, President Bill Clinton, next. And without delay, just weeks before the presidential election, top Republican senators vow to give President Trump's Supreme Court pick a vote.
I will be putting forth the nominee next week. It will be a woman.
How might that affect the presidential race and the future of the Supreme Court? I'll speak with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar and top White House official Mark Short next. Plus, staggering toll. The U.S. nears 200,000 coronavirus deaths. How did this happen? And how much worse will it get?
Wearing a mask when you can't physically distance is absolutely critical.
White House Coronavirus Task Force member Admiral Brett Giroir joins me to discuss ahead. Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is remembering an American icon. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is dead at the age of 87. She was only the second woman appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. She spent her career fighting against discrimination on the basis of sex, becoming a hugely popular feminist figure later in life, affectionately called the notorious RBG. Now in death, her vacancy is already reshaping the presidential race and setting up an epic pre-election clash between parties on Capitol Hill, as many Senate Republicans make it clear that their 2016 call to let the voters, not then President Obama, decide who gets to fill an election year Supreme Court vacancy was not actually a principle, but rather a soundbite that is no longer operative now that a Republican is in the White House. According to NPR, Ginsburg told her granddaughter just a few days before her death, quote, my most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed, unquote. But President Trump is wasting no time, announcing at a rally Saturday night that he intends to nominate a woman as his pick in the coming week. And joining me now, former President Bill Clinton, who appointed Ginsburg to the court in 1993. Mr. President, thank you so much for taking the time today to remember your friend. I want to play a clip from when you nominated then Judge Ginsburg to the Supreme Court in 1993. Take a listen.
I am proud to nominate for Associate Justice of the Supreme Court Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg, throughout her life, she has repeatedly stood for the individual, the person less well off, the outsider in society, and has given those people greater hope by telling them that they have a place in our legal system.
You have said that her 27 years on the court exceeded even your highest expectations when you appointed her. How so?
Well, first of all, she was a force for equality for men as well as women, for example. She was consistent, and she did it in a way that was level-headed and on the level and respectful of different opinions and the other judges on the court. So she was highly respected because she bent over backwards to work with the other judges when she could, and she stood up and was counted when she couldn't. I mean, she just, and of course along the way she became kind of a cultural icon, which surprised even me, I think. But she made people believe that she was doing her job, and that whether they agreed or disagreed with her opinion, she was completely straight about it, completely on the level, at a time when there's a lot of cynicism about things that aren't on the level. So I think it meant something to her. I think, you know, she came to Little Rock a couple of years ago to give a speech at my library, and we couldn't have it at the library. We had to move it to the place where we play basketball and hockey. And there were 15,000 people who got in, and almost that many who tried to get in and couldn't.
You considered several other individuals for the Supreme Court before you picked her. In his memoir, Republican Senator Orrin Hatch claims credit for suggesting that you consider Ginsburg. How did you eventually choose her?
Well, first of all, we looked at 40 candidates, and then we got down to 5, one of whom has been public. Governor Cuomo didn't want to be on the Supreme Court and didn't want to leave New York. But I thought non-judges should be considered. And I also considered Secretary Babbitt, the Secretary of the Interior, who would have been a great judge, but we needed him where he was on the front lines of the conservation and environmental movement. I considered one judge that I thought was the most brilliant judge on the federal bench who had health issues I was concerned about. So, and Justice Breyer, whom I later was able to appoint to the Supreme Court. And but I really was interested in Ruth Ginsburg, and Hillary had talked to me a lot about her work because she'd been involved in the Women Lawyers Association of the Bar Association when we were in Arkansas. So anyway, we sneaked her in there on a Sunday night. Nobody knew it. And I had a conversation of a lifetime with her, and I knew after we talked for 10 minutes that I should appoint her.
Do you remember anything about that conversation that you could share with us as to why she dazzled you so much?
Yeah, because first of all, she was disarmingly straightforward. We hadn't been talking but a couple of minutes before I felt like we were just two friends having an honest conversation about American history, the Constitution, and the law, and how it affected real people. I was very, very determined that whoever I put on the court would be on the level and would see the people first and understand the human impact. And she really did. She had this uncanny ability to be very much in the weeds, if you will, of the intellectual legal arguments, and yet never lose sight of the human impact of her decisions.
She was confirmed 96-3. 96-3, almost an unthinkable vote today.
She was also very close friends with Justice Antonin Scalia, virtually her polar opposite on the bench. I want to show our viewers, here they are together on vacation in India, riding an elephant. The other day, Scalia's son relayed a story on Twitter about a friend who saw his father giving roses to Justice Ginsburg for her birthday. And this friend said, name one 5-4 case where you got Justice Ginsburg, you got her vote, and for all these roses that you're giving her. And Scalia replied, quote, some things are more important than votes. You yourself have become famously close with George H.W. Bush. Do you think this era is gone?
Well, I hope not. I hope not. You know, President George W. Bush and I still run a leadership program together, and we talk all the time, and I really value our friendship. I value the conversations we have, and I think life can become kind of boring if everybody you're around thinks just like you do. And I thought it was funny. I think she and Scalia bonded over a lot of things, including opera. So it's nice to know that people are people and that they have other concerns.
President Trump has vowed to nominate a woman this week to fill that slot on the Supreme Court. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has vowed to hold a vote. What's your reaction?
Well, of course, it's superficially hypocritical, isn't it? I mean, Mitch McConnell wouldn't give President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, a hearing 10 months before the presidential election. And that meant that we went a long time with 8 judges on the court. This is what they do. I think that, you know, both for the Senator McConnell and President Trump, their first value is power, and they're trying to jam the court with as many ideological judges as they can. But to be fair, there is a case to be made for the argument McConnell made that in the middle of a presidential season, you should give the voters a say. That's what he said when it was 10 months away. But when the shoe's on the other foot and he wants to judge, we're fewer than 50 days away, and that argument doesn't cut any mustard. So it's gonna further spread cynicism in our system. And you know, he said he wouldn't do it. It's very interesting. Abraham Lincoln, and the Republicans occasionally still claim, had a similar situation. In early October, Justice Roger Taney died in 1864, and President Lincoln wanted to appoint Salmon Chase, who'd been Secretary of the Treasury, to the Supreme Court, but he did not do it until after the election. He understood it was very close to the election, and he shouldn't do it. And Senator McConnell said before he thought the people were entitled to a say. I don't know what's happened to make him stop trusting the American people, but apparently when it's to his advantage, the people are not entitled to a say. So it is what it is. It's politics. But I think we should remember that. McConnell said what he said. Lindsey Graham said it shouldn't happen. Let's see how he votes. Senator Grassley said it hadn't happened. Let's see how he votes. I mean, this is it's a power play, and they think they can do it. The other interesting thing, they can do it because Senator McConnell made an agreement between the Republicans and the Democratic senators to end the filibuster for Court of Appeal judges, but keep it for Supreme Court judges. And the only reason they had to end it is McConnell had organized it. He voted against everybody on the Court of Appeal. He didn't want the Democrats to have any judges. There was no review. It was just whoever you put up, I'm going to try to beat. But the minute President Trump was elected, he got rid of that agreement. That became history, and all of a sudden we couldn't have a debate on a Supreme Court judge. And I think that was too bad because, you know, you want somebody who can do what Ruth Ginsburg did, get 96% of the vote.
Yeah. I just want to ask you, sir, before we go, Democrats are saying that if there is this vote, if the Republicans do push the Trump nominee through, that all options are on the table, and they're even talking about potentially, if obviously Republicans lose the Senate and the White House, and do not win back the House, if Democrats have control of everything, they're talking about adding justices to the Supreme Court. What do you think of that idea?
Well, the Constitution doesn't prescribe a fixed number of judges to the Supreme Court. The last time it was tried, it didn't work out so well when Roosevelt was president. But I think first, I'm not in politics anymore. I'll let somebody else debate that. But secondly, let's try to do this right now. We're really close to the election. And let's remember the example Abraham Lincoln set, and let's remember the commitments and the comments Mitch McConnell made. I think it would be good for Senator McConnell to make him feel better when he gets up in the morning if he proved that he wasn't being a hypocrite at the time and he just stuck with his position. And I think all the other Republicans should be asked to do the same. But, you know, you can't keep a democracy if there's one set of rules for one group and another set for everybody else.
All right,
we do actually need to live under the same set of rules.
Former President Bill Clinton, I know you have...
that's what...
Go ahead, sir.
No, and I said, and we're honoring Justice Ginsburg today. I think that's the main thing she would say. Let's all live under the same set of rules and do what's fair for everybody.
Former President Bill Clinton, thank you so much. Stay safe and stay healthy. Best to your family. Take a listen to Justice Ginsburg explaining when she would be satisfied with the number of women justices on the High Court.
People ask me sometimes, when do you think it will be enough? When will there be enough women on the court? And my answer is, when there are 9.
Here in Washington, senators are mourning the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, even as they prepare for what will almost assuredly be a nasty political battle over her seat on the court. Joining me now to discuss, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat and member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much for joining us on this morning.
Thanks, Jay.
You said that Justice Ginsburg, quote, showed future women lawyers like me that anything and everything was possible, unquote. What impact did Ginsburg have on your career?
She was an icon, a hero, and you always stand on the shoulders, no matter how small hers were. Her footprint was so huge because you saw a woman who literally was told, oh, you shouldn't go to law school, and then she goes and she graduates #1 in her class. Oh, when these equal rights cases, and she created the principles and the ideas and the theories of the case. They say, well, maybe a man should argue that before the Supreme Court. She says, no, I'm going to do it. She goes on and creates landmark law when it comes to making sure women can go to work and be protected. Then she gets on the Supreme Court herself, the second woman in the country that is appointed to the Supreme Court. And of course, from there it's history. She becomes an international icon. And I think for a lot of women, that's amazing too, that in your 80s, you can have the name Notorious RBG and your own hashtag, to the point where my daughter, once we were at an event and there was up in college, and she comes up to me, she goes, Mom, it's so cool to meet the Notorious RBG, and if you don't mind, I'm putting this on my Facebook page, but I'm going to cut you out. And, you know, I think that is literally what she became. And so as I heard President Clinton talk about how she had exceeded all expectations, I think we're at a moment in time where our democracy and the people voting and where we are right now, we have to exceed expectations.
So,
and that's why this is so emotional for so many people.
yeah, and I hate to turn to the ugly business of politics, but it's right in front of us, and you sit on the Senate Judiciary.
It's not always ugly.
Well, I'm anticipating, and you sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which will be tasked with considering President Trump's nominee. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that, quote, President Trump's nominee will receive a vote. Is it fair to say that there really is nothing that Democrats can do to stop this?
First of all, I put it on my Republican colleagues because they know what's at stake. People are literally voting in my state right now, this weekend. And when you look at history, as President Clinton just described, the only one this close was when Abraham Lincoln was president. And he made the wise decision to allow the election to occur and then decide who would nominate and who he would nominate. That happened. And so when you look at the situation now, we're voting right now. Healthcare is on the line. Jake, there is going to be an oral argument on November 10th on the Affordable Care Act, literally the decision for hundreds of millions of people about whether or not they're going to be kicked off their health care if they have a pre-existing condition. Environmental rules, as people can't even breathe some of the air out in the West Coast, those are on the line. The right to organize, that is on the line. So it is coinciding with an election. So that's why whatever Mitch McConnell does right now, my Republican colleagues understand that the voters are voting. And a number of them have already said that the next president, whoever wins, should be able to pick the justice. The people pick the president picks the justice. That was the McConnell rule, and that is the precedent they set.
But you don't have a plan other than appealing to the consciences of Republican senators, or not just a plan, you don't have the ability to stop it other than, I mean, I have heard floated the idea that some activists want Democratic senators to block the government funding bill. Is that something that you would do?
Right now, first of all, Ruth Bader Ginsburg just died. Secondly, while Mitch McConnell has said what he has said, these people aren't beholden to him. They're beholden to their own integrity, to their own moral compasses. They're going to have to make their decisions. Yes, there's all kinds of things that we could look at for strategies, reforms in the future, all of that. Yes, all of that I've always said should be considered. But right now, we have a number of Republican senators that are going to have to look inside and make a decision for themselves, for their states. They are independently elected about how they're going to handle this. I read her last words. Justice Ginsburg, my most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about what you said in 2016 after Merrick Garland's nomination to the Supreme Court didn't even get a hearing. You said, quote, the Constitution is clear, the Senate must consider the president's nominee and then choose whether to vote yes or no. We must do our job, hold hearings, and vote. Now, I understand that there's a big difference between a seat opening up in February and a seat opening up 44 days before the presidential election. But you weren't talking about timelines there. You were talking about the Constitution. If the Constitution was clear then, is it still clear now?
We are in modern history where literally just in the last time a justice was considered after someone died unexpectedly, Justice Scalia, a new rule was set by our colleagues. And as President Clinton said, you cannot have one set of rules for a Democratic president and another for the Republicans. They set this precedent, and they can't mess around and use raw political power right in the middle of an election. And I would say that is a major difference because people are voting right now. And people understand what's going on, that they care about things like women's rights. They care about things like being able to keep their health care. And so when my Republican colleagues, and some of them have already come out and said the right thing because they understand what's at stake here, that they don't want to join in with the president who is lying and lying and lying in terms of how he's going to handle a Supreme Court nomination. Literally, our democracy is at stake. And I think Michelle Obama said it best when she said, your life depends on it, so you better vote.
Well, speaking of that, you talked about how the Supreme Court is going to hold oral arguments on Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, 1 week after Election Day, November 10th. Even if Chief Justice Roberts votes to uphold Obamacare, it would be a 4-4 tie, and that would mean that the lower court ruling is in place, which would strike down the entire law as unconstitutional. So if there is a Trump justice in there, or if there isn't a Trump justice in there, doesn't it seem as though Obamacare is essentially dead?
No. First of all, that case has been discredited and strongly criticized by people all over the spectrum as that case comes to the Supreme Court. Secondly, the justices could do many different things, and I'm not going to get into, I could take up your entire show with this, in terms of how they handle the entire Affordable Care Act. So I don't concede anything, but what I do know is the Affordable Care Act has helped Americans. So many of them now have health care when they didn't before. Every single American now has the protection that if you have diabetes or if you have Alzheimer's, that you are not going to be kicked off of your health insurance. That is a big deal. That is what's at stake. And I think what you translate here, and I think about the fact that this is Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat, Jay. This is her position. She never gave up, right? So when you ask me about rules in the future and all these things we can look at for reform that are very worthy to look at, I just look at the fact that she would not concede right now. She didn't concede when everyone told her, oh, you can't change the law, women can't be protected, oh, a man should argue that case. She just kept going. And I think that's what you feel, the spirit of all those people showing up at the Supreme Court, the outpouring of support for her, all the young people that are voting by mail, all the young people that are willing to show up and vote like they've never before voted, and all the people that are afraid of 4 more years with this president when they are less safe than they were before he got into office. No, I think what we have going on in this country right now with people voting in the middle of a pandemic with 200,000 people dead, I think it is like a literal, virtual, to fit our times, revolution going on. People have had it with this guy, and that's why Joe Biden is leading in states that no one ever thought that he could win, but he's going to do it.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks,
we
Jay.
appreciate it. With weeks before a hugely consequential election, the president has a new focus, a new Supreme Court justice. Who might he pick? What will be the political consequences, if any? Joining me now, the Chief of Staff to the Vice President, Mark Short. Mr. Short, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jay.
Can you give us any idea of a timeline here? Will the president introduce a nominee this week? Does he want a confirmation vote before the election?
Jake, thanks for having me on. I think that the president is prepared to make a nomination very soon. I think, as you know, we've had a couple nominations that have provided the president a chance to interview a lot of candidates. He's narrowed his list, and he looks forward to making a nomination, fulfilling his obligation as president to make a nomination. As some of your guests have commented already this morning, the reality in history is that there's been 29 vacancies during a presidential election year, and 29 times presidents have put forward a nominee. So the president's going to stick with his obligation to do that. He looks forward to making a nominee that I think the American people will be proud of. And it's one of the reasons they elected Donald Trump to be president in 2016 was because he made the Supreme Court a central part of his candidacy.
You heard President Clinton say that all this flip-flopping by Republicans on the issue of nominating a Supreme Court justice during an election year will only increase public cynicism. In 2016, then-candidate Trump was asked if he was okay with President Obama nominating a replacement for Justice Antonin Scalia, who passed away. Here's what candidate Trump said then.
I think it's up to Mitch McConnell and everybody else to stop it. It's called delay, delay, delay.
So the Trump position for a Democratic president was delay, 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 but for him it's urgent to confirm someone now. How do you push back against the impression voters are going to have that there seems to be absolutely no principle at stake here? It's just about raw power.
Yeah, actually, Jake, it's a pretty easy historical precedent. Of those 29 I laid out for you, there are 19 of those vacancies that happened when the party in the Senate, the majority party, was the same party the president. Of those 19, 9 out of 10 were confirmed before Election Day, and another 8 out of 9 after Election Day in the lame duck period, including John Marshall. Take the separate scenario in which the party in control in the Senate is a different party than the president. There are 10 such vacancies. Only 1 out of 10 was filled before Election Day. And you have to go back to the 1880s to find that example under Grover Cleveland's presidency. So actually the historical precedent is pretty clear.
When you have a party in power in the Senate whose job it is to advise and consent and confirm the president's nominee, it continually is shown historically that that is the job of the Senate, to confirm the president's nomination, and history shows it's the president's obligation to make a nomination. When you have a party in different power in the United States Senate, those nominations have not moved forward. And that's exactly what Leader McConnell did in 2016.
I take the point on the difference of power between the White House and the Senate, but a lot of Republicans weren't talking about that in 2016. They were talking about the principle of, we're so close to an election, let's let the voters decide. And it isn't just President Trump changing his tune on this, it's also virtually every Senate Republican. Take a listen to the man who is now the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Lindsey Graham, back in 2016.
If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me, and you'd be absolutely right.
Graham doesn't care anymore. He says he's going to move forward with the president's nominee anyway. I guess the bigger question I have is there not a risk that this obvious hypocrisy may cost Republicans in competitive races their seats, being associated with it? Might you be putting, say, Senator Susan Collins or Senator Cory Gardner, who are in very tough re-election fights, at risk?
Jake, I reject the notion there's hypocrisy. As I said, the historical precedent is when your party's in power and the president nominates consistently, going back to George Washington, the party has continued to confirm those nominees. So I don't think there's hypocrisy. Regarding the politics of this, again, the people of America elected Donald Trump president in 2016 in large part because he was so transparent and put forward a list and say, here's who I would nominate. We still haven't seen a list from Joe Biden. We welcome a list from Joe Biden that would show the American people, if he's elected, here's who I would appoint to the Supreme Court. But as far as the politics of it, I think the American people wanted Donald Trump to be in a position to make these nominations, and it's his obligation to do so.
I would love to see a list from Joe Biden. I'd also love to see President Trump's tax returns, as long as we're talking about precedents along those lines.
You know, that's clever, Jake, but the reality is we know that the president has gone through multiple financial disclosures that are more revealing than tax returns. That was an issue in 2016. The American people elected him in 2016. He'll continue to fill out those financial disclosures.
I'm glad you think it's clever. It's also just a precedent. He's the first person since '76 who hasn't done it. But let's stick to this issue about Ginsburg and the Supreme Court vacancy. Do you want to vote before the election? Is that important to the president?
I think that, as you know, Justice Ginsburg was confirmed within 43 days of her nomination. Today, we sit here 44 days out from the election, so it's certainly possible. But I think that the president's obligation is to make the nomination. We'll leave the timetable to Leader McConnell.
According to NPR, Justice Ginsburg dictated a message to her granddaughter in her final days. It said, quote, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed," unquote. Did the president ever consider honoring Justice Ginsburg's dying wish?
You know, Jake, I think that today we as a nation mourn the loss of Justice Ginsburg. She's certainly a giant upon whose shoulders many will stand, and she blazed a trail for many women in the legal profession. But the decision of when to nominate does not lie with her. And I know as well in the last couple of months, she gave an interview to NPR in which she also counseled that she would oppose any sort of court backing. So the reality is that this is the president's obligation to make a nomination. He'll do so, and he'll do so in the near future.
The Supreme Court is poised to hear oral arguments on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. That's going to be 1 week after Election Day. Even if Chief Justice Roberts votes with the 3 Democratic-appointed justices, a 4-4 tie on the court would leave a lower court ruling in place, striking down Obamacare as unconstitutional. More than 20 million Americans could lose their health insurance. There clearly is no replacement plan ready to become law, despite promises since last year that one would be released imminently. I guess the question I have is, how can the White House push this through, even though it will obviously cause harm to millions of Americans who will not have insurance, not have protections for pre-existing conditions, because there is no replacement for them?
Jake, if that hypothetical scenario played out, there would be possibilities to make sure that people with pre-existing conditions have those guarantees. The president has stated multiple times he supports protection for people with pre-existing conditions. And the reality is that Obamacare, I think, and candidly, was also on the ballot in 2016 because a lot of Americans rejected the notion that they should be forced to purchase something they don't want. This president has helped make more more insurance plans available on the Obamacare exchanges to help make sure those prices stay down and he's kept it afloat. But we reject the notion that people should be compelled to purchase something that they don't want. I think that's foundational to that case.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you keep talking about the 2016 election results as representing what the American people want. And look, President Trump won according to the rules of the Electoral College, which is what those are the rules we play by. But it doesn't reflect the will of the popular vote, because the popular vote, Hillary Clinton actually got 3 million more votes. So I just wonder how you can keep invoking the results as representative of anything other than, you know, a legitimate victory in the Electoral College, because it doesn't represent the will of the people according to what a majority or at least a plurality want.
I don't know, Jake, if it's your position that we shouldn't have an electoral college.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
But I also think that the reality is that if this was purely a notion of popular vote, you would have seen Donald Trump campaign a lot more in states like New York and California. But the reality was it's not. So the president was campaigning based upon how do I make sure that we get the most electoral votes.
All right. Mark Short, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. I hope you're staying safe and healthy.
Thank you, Jake. Thanks for having me.
What made Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg exactly so notorious? Some of the women who knew her best join me to reminisce ahead. Plus, the U.S. is on track to hit 200,000 coronavirus deaths very shortly, and experts do not expect to see any slowdown.
Do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? Really?
The first presidential debate. Watch it live on CNN. Special coverage Wednesday, September 30th.
A mask can say a lot about the person who wears it, but even more about the person who doesn't.
Everyone, you know, regardless of symptoms or not, is tested on a daily basis. If somebody were to test positive, of course, we would trace their contacts. They would be quarantined. People are quarantined before they enter this campus and when they first arrive, to ensure that to the extent there's any virus in their system that isn't showing up on the test, that it gives it time to incubate so we do catch it. And so we're protected, in essence, from the high case rate around us, but it's not, as I've said before, a hermetically sealed bubble of any kind. And so we have people who go in and on and off our campus, certainly many of the Disney employees, by virtue of having everyone wear masks. It's critically important. Everyone is wearing a mask on our community. Everybody is following the appropriate hand washing, physical distancing protocols, that even if somebody does have an infection, that it doesn't spread.
their news from CNN than any other news source.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. The United States is on track to mark a staggering milestone, imminently 200,000 deaths in the U.S. from the coronavirus. It's an unthinkable and tragic loss of life, and it does not appear that the pace of virus deaths will be slowing anytime soon. Joining me now, a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, Admiral Brett Giroir. Thank you so much for joining us, Admiral. So we're now on the cusp of reaching 200,000 coronavirus deaths in the U.S. I want you to take a listen to what President Trump said on March 29th about that number.
If we could hold that down, as we're saying, to 100,000, it's a horrible number. Maybe even less, but to 100,000, so we have between 100 and 200,000. We all together have done a very good job.
Now, forgetting for a second the bizarreness of a claim that 1 to 200,000 deaths is a good job, especially that given to official numbers, it's the highest number of deaths in the world. Even accepting this metric, we're about to pass it. Bill Gates said this week that, quote, "This has been a mismanaged situation every step of the way. It's shocking, it's unbelievable, the fact that we would be among the worst in the world," unquote. Why?
So thank you for having me on, Jake. Look, every death is a tragedy. I'm a pediatric ICU physician. I've worked with patients who have died and their families every single day. That's why we're working every day to reduce that. Where we are right now, we know so much more than we did early on. From the peaks in early July and late July, the number of cases are down by 41%. The number of people in an ICU are down 62%. The number of deaths are down almost 30%. But we have to stay strong and do the things that could decrease the spread. Number one, wearing a mask when we can't physically distance. Number two, avoiding crowds. Number three, hygiene. And with smart testing, we can flatten the curve and slow the spread. Again, we are working every day. We do have a formula to reduce the deaths, reduce the cases, but we all have to be disciplined and diligent to make sure we obey that every single day.
When President Trump holds a rally and there are no masks required and no social distancing, is that this example that you're talking about when you talk about everybody needing to do their part to bring the numbers down? I mean, I think we have 40,000 new cases a day. We just hit 200,000 deaths, the largest number of any country in the world. I mean, how is this not a failure? And how is President Trump leading us out of it in the right way, according to your own words?
So let me just answer the two parts of that question, and thank you for that. Number one, I want people to understand that we do have a number of cases. It's about 35 or 36,000 per day, averaged over 7 days. That number is reduced by about 41%. And the reason why I want to emphasize that is to make sure that people are empowered to know that they can slow the spread and change the course. They can save lives by doing the things we talk about, wearing a mask. And on the second point, look, it doesn't matter. Biology is independent of politics. If you cannot physically distance, all the docs, all the public health experts, all of us are really unanimous that it's important to wear a mask when you cannot physically distance. Avoid the indoor crowded spaces, wash your hands, combined with smart testing. And again, testing is a very important component of this, and that's the way that we reduce the spread, slow the curve, flatten the curve, and reduce mortality. But we have to keep doing that. This will not be over until we get a vaccine that's widely available.
What about the rallies? I mean, the number, Dave Matthews isn't touring this year because of the risk to his fans. But President Trump's rallies, the people are not wearing masks. I mean, these are super spreader events potentially.
So again, I just want to repeat what I said. Biology is independent of politics.
Tell President Trump
wants to do. We always encourage the wearing of a mask because it is it's a critical step to prevent the spread. And we want people to understand that this needs to be echoed from the local, from the state, from the public, and certainly all of us on the task force want to make sure that people understand that. Every week we supply governors with very specific recommendations down to a county level of how to slow the spread. And again, this is one of the most important things we can do. We are very encouraged by a vaccine. We have new treatments that if you do get ill, you are much more likely to have a great outcome. But right now, prevention is certainly the most important step in wearing a mask, avoiding crowds, especially.
Moncef Slaoui said middle of 2021. Why is President Trump making promises about a vaccine that none of his experts agree with?
So I'm so pleased you asked me that, because I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding here. And I think everybody is right, but they're talking about different aspects. In front of the Senate, Dr. Redfield and I both said that a vaccine that would be widely available in hundreds of millions of doses would not likely happen until mid-2021. That is a fact. President Trump said that some projections, according to manufacturing, if things go as planned, we could have as many as 100 million doses by the end of this year. That is correct. What I want to say, and I said in front of the Senate and as well as other media, is that from my perspective, even a few million doses early in November or December, if we have 5 or 10% of the population that we can vaccinate, we can get 80 or 90% of the benefit. For example, if we could vaccinate workers in nursing homes, we could protect the elderly and the vulnerable from disease. That would make an enormous impact on mortality. If we could vaccinate our teachers and those with pre-existing conditions or those surrounding those people. So I think this has been misunderstood. I think Dr. Redfield's correct. The president is correct in the segment he spoke about. But what I do want to say is that, you know, a vaccine as early as possible, even in a few million doses, will be a godsend in terms of outcomes, hospitalizations, morbidity, and deaths.
Well, I think that you and Dr. Redfield are correct, and Moncef Slaoui are correct, but President Trump said we're essentially there, meaning we're essentially there in terms of having a safe, efficacious vaccine. And I know that the government is paying for hundreds of millions of doses of vaccines, anticipating that one of them is going to work. But you will agree with me that as of right now, even though there are 3 in stage 3 trials, we do not have a safe, efficacious vaccine ready to go, right?
The availability of a vaccine depends on one thing only, and that is the evidence and the science. We have to wait till the trials demonstrate that a vaccine is safe and effective. There are all kinds of safeguards to make sure that this is an independent, scientifically based decision. There's an independent data and safety monitoring board, and until that happens, you can't even start the process. So right now, we do not have a safe and effective vaccine. The evidence and the data will drive that. I can't predict that. It depends on how safe and effective the vaccine is and how many cases of coronavirus are actually in the study population, purely based on evidence and data. And I just want to assure the American people that when a vaccine is authorized by the FDA, it will be based on science and data. If I'm prioritized, I will be in line. If my granddaughter's prioritized, she will be in line. We can have confidence that when that happens, it will be safe and effective, but not before. We have to let the evidence and the data drive it.
Let's talk about testing, because that's your area. On July 14th, you said, quote, we're going to be over 1 million tests, very soon. That's not even a question. Actually, the average number of coronavirus tests in the last 7 days is 778,000 a day, not 1 million a day. What happened?
So this month we have the availability of about 90 million tests, and about half of those will contact trace 8 or 10, so the numbers go down. But we do want to encourage more testing. We have sent surge sites, federal surge sites, to 19 different cities, primarily focusing on the younger population that could be asymptomatic, because we know they're very important in the spread of this infection. We're going to continue to surge. We're going to continue to support testing. And again, every week we send county level recommendations to states. We want to work with them to increase that. We do need more testing, particularly in the outbreak areas that we identify on a weekly basis.
Al, as a parent, I have to say that I thought by September we would be up to speed where kids could go back to school and the students and the faculty and the staff and all the support workers could maybe get tested once a week, so we know it will be safe for the kids and their teachers to be there. Testing is not up to that level. There are more than 56 million K-12 students in the United States. Why are we not there? Why can my kids not get tested? So many kids are suffering because they have to be at home studying remotely. You and your administration know the costs this is bearing on these families. Why do we not have testing for schools?
So, two answers to that. Number one, I want to be clear that testing every student every week is not necessary to bring children back to school. And in fact, almost no state has that in their plan. It's very important if a child gets sick to test them, to contact trace around that, and to perhaps do some baseline surveillance testing. We do have that kind of testing available. And again, the Binax Now, 150 million that we just purchased, we'll start distributing those to states. I work with states every day. What schools need to do, the most important thing is, number one, reduce the community spread. When we reduce the virus in the community, that's a very important step. Again, is not testing every student every week, the sick and the contact trace, and a baseline of surveillance. Maybe that's 5 or 10 or 15% per week. We are the states to implement that.
Admiral Giroir, thank you so much for your time. I just want to say before you go, I know you won't comment on this because I tried to get you to. The most powerful person in this country is constantly undermining him to change that message, because one of the reasons spread continues is because people are not respecting the words you are saying, words that I think are very important. Thank you so much for being with us today, Admiral. We really appreciate it. I want to turn back now to the life and legacy of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Joining us now to discuss Nina Totenberg, who's our legal affairs correspondent, with a 5 decades-long friendship with Ginsburg. Erin Carmon, the co-author of the great book, The Notorious RBG, and a CNN contributor, and Joe Biskupic, CNN Supreme Court analyst, who had private conversations with Ginsburg over nearly 2 decades. First of all, let me just say to all of you, my condolences, because as important as she was to so many millions of Americans, I know she actually personally meant something to all 3 of you. Nina, let me start with you. Your relationship with Justice Ginsburg goes back nearly 5 decades. Long before she became a judge, it all began with a phone call earlier in your career. Tell us about that call and the friendship.
So I was in my early 20s, assigned to cover the Supreme Court, about which I knew almost nothing. And I started reading this brief that turned out to be the first case in which the Supreme Court held that the state couldn't discriminate against women arbitrarily in its laws. But I didn't really understand that, because it involved the 14th Amendment, passed after the Civil War, when women didn't even have the right to vote. So I went to a phone booth in the Supreme Court press room, when in those days we had phone booths, and I called her up because she was the author of the brief. She was a professor at Rutgers, and I asked her this question. And an hour later, I staggered out of that phone booth like a goose primed for foie gras. I knew so much. A few months later, we actually met at a conference, and we never agreed on which conference it was about, but it was very boring. So we went shopping.
That's wonderful. Joan, the Supreme Court is famously secretive. Justices take their privacy seriously. But you had several opportunities to meet with Ginsburg year after year, where she was all too happy to share her time, her thoughts. How unusual was that level of access, and why do you think she was always so comfortable, candidly speaking her mind? Sometimes it even got her in trouble.
It did. But, I think she had a message. She was quite generous about her colleagues. I first went to see her when I was writing the biography of Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman on the court. And something that we don't think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in these terms is she had a very vivid way of speaking, and she would tell me anecdote after anecdote about her experiences with Justice O'Connor, and then her good friend Scalia, who I also wrote about. So I think she wanted to bring me her kind of the human dimension of these people that we might not have seen otherwise. And I have to say, she was very generous about how she thought about her colleagues. She could also be kind of cheeky in her sense of humor, and not brazen, but cheeky. And one of my favorite early tales that she told me about Justice O'Connor was when Ruth Bader Ginsburg went on in 1993, and then Chief Justice Rehnquist had assigned her a very difficult first opinion, a complicated case, and Justice Ginsburg went to Sandra Day O'Connor and said, "Sandra, how can he do this to me? It's so complicated." And Sandra Day O'Connor said, "Ruth, you just write it, you do it, and you wait for your next assignment." And Justice Ginsburg said to me, "That was so Sandra." So she was wonderful to the very end, even when she was so open about President Donald Trump and some of her other colleagues.
Erin, she became something of a liberal pop culture icon in the last few years, as Bill Clinton referenced earlier, through Saturday Night Live skits and her viral workout videos, and of course the notorious RBG, a term that you helped popularize. Supreme Court justices typically don't get that kind of popular attention from the public. What did she make of this, especially that it was so late in life?
Well, you know, she liked to say that she and the notorious B.I.G. were both from Brooklyn. Even though in the beginning, I think she actually had to ask her clerks, who is this notorious? Look, I mean, Joan and Nina have both spoken to how much she saw her role as explaining to the public the work of the court and the other things that she was passionate about, including feminism. And so the notorious RBG, I mean, of course, it was flattering for her and she enjoyed connecting with younger generations, but I think it was also about this broader project of helping more people understand what it was that the court was doing. And when I think about what it was that young people saw in her, and not just young women, but also young men, and not just young people, people of all generations, it was who she was, and it was what she stood for. And what she stood for was more than just middle-class white women getting jobs. It was a broad vision of gender equality and reproductive freedom that unfortunately is still unfinished. And I think that just the fact that in her life and in her jurisprudence as a lawyer and as a justice, standing for that was something that really inspired a lot of people from her vantage point on the highest court in the land.
And Nina, what impact do you think Ginsburg leaves on the institution of the court itself?
She really was an institutionalist, and I think that in her fear that was that if she died, which happened, of course, and she said on the last days of her life, "My fervent wish is that I not be replaced until a new president is installed," and by that she meant whoever won the election, because she feared for the institution. If there was the kind of maelstrom, the kind of firestorm you see unfolding now, and she was very much against court packing plans, expanding the number of people on the court. She said 9 was the right number, but she foresaw that if there was too much politicking in the middle of an election, it would have a rebound effect, and that's what worried her. And she loved her colleagues. She did everything she knew how to make her interaction with them, and you see it in their statements, how personal their statements are after her death. Justice Souter said he loved her to pieces. Justice Thomas said that he couldn't imagine a better colleague, and how much she would be missed. And that is what she brought to the court, and that's what she wanted to be able to continue, and I think she was very, and probably justifiably, worried about.
Erin, we've already talked about with Senator Klobuchar and Mark Short the idea that Obamacare hangs in the balance, but Roe v. Wade quite obviously does as well. You wrote in New York Magazine this weekend that her passing leaves her work not only unfinished but at risk of being undone. You also write something I thought was very interesting, that Ginsburg, quote, continued to critique Roe, the decision which permitted abortion rights in this country. She continued to critique it as poorly reasoned and too sweeping to the end. Tell us more about that.
So Justice Ginsburg's greatest wish was that reproductive freedom be protected in all of its manifestations. She brought a case on behalf of a woman who the state was actually trying to force to have an abortion. And she hoped that that would be the case that would ensure reproductive freedom. She was a champion of abortion rights. Let that not be misunderstood. But what she wanted was for women's reproductive freedom to be grounded in equality as opposed to all the different ways that the court found it. And she also thought that the court was not the only lever for social change. Yes, she was an institutionalist, but she wanted all of the levers of government to work, including Congress and the executive branch. And she was really inspired by the women's movement that took to the streets. So she thought that there was all different roles. Her role was as a litigator and as a judge. But the fact that people were hitting the streets made her work in the 70s easier. So yes, she did think that Roe went too far and didn't have the right reasoning. But ultimately, what she wanted was a world in which all people could pursue their own destinies, regardless of whether they were men and women, regardless of whether they were ready to have a child or wanted to have one.
Joan, your final thoughts?
Yeah, you know, she had a sense of always pushing and learning. The last time I saw her earlier this year, it had to be it was on a topic of civil procedure and how important it was to fundamental liberty. And she had typed up a quote from Felix Frankfurter that she brought to our interview, and she clutched that piece of paper, and as she said, she had been so excited to go look this up again, and there was something about her that was still had a schoolgirl youthful enthusiasm about everything, whether it meant, you know, the underpinnings of Roe or just her own learning experience. She was always in the game 100%.
All right, what a treat to talk to all three of you. Thank you so much. Fareed Zakaria starts now.
This is GPS, the Global Public Square. Welcome to all of you in the United States and around the world. I'm Fareed Zakaria, coming to you live from New York. Today on the show, Trump and his powerful friends. What is behind his relationships with the likes of Putin, Kim, Xi, and Erdogan? The legendary journalist Bob Woodward on what he learned while reporting his new bestseller, Rage. Then, peace in the Middle East. On Tuesday, the White House hosted Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain for a peace deal signing. Is this the shape of the new Middle East? And what happens to the Palestinians? We have a voice from the region. And America's West Coast is on fire in a way it has never been before. People are fleeing. Is this the beginning of climate migration? And just how will climate change affect where people live in America and around the world? But first, here's my take. What explains why some countries handled the COVID-19 pandemic well and others did poorly? It's a complicated question, but my interview last week with Taiwan's former vice president got me thinking. If we look at the place that has arguably had the greatest success, the answer is failure. Taiwan gets the gold medal for its coronavirus strategy.